We're going to talk about emotions today. So I titled this talk, How to Write Emotionally Without Using a Tissue, or using the ly word, which is not a bad thing. Those adverbs are not necessarily bad, but you really don't want to use those. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And thank you all for coming out this morning. It's such a beautiful day. It's supposed to hit 70 today. Nice. And then tomorrow it's supposed to get windy. It's, it's March. What do you want? Okay. Get right to the point here. Emotions lie at the core of every character's actions, choices, and words, all of which drive the story. My goal for you is to put more tools into your writer's toolbox. Use some of these techniques. You can enrich your writing and make it more powerful. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. I was telling Lorena earlier that my goal is to be able to give a 1-hour talk without using any notes like David Morrell did. Remember that last year? It was disgusting. It was not fair at all. And Kurt Hickman can get up and talk like that too, and it's just, I don't know how they do it. So I'm going to have to refer back to my notes, and I apologize for that. One of these days I'm going to get up and give an hour talk without any notes, and I'm going to say, yes! So here's an example of what not to write, and what we do all the time. Charles felt the big man grab him around the chest and throw him carelessly onto the horse. All right, well, I wrote that. Back in the old days, before I knew what to do, yeah, I take credit for it, or the blame, or whatever. But I give Kurt Hickman the credit for making me realize that the word felt is a filter word. And felt is something that you do not want to write. It's not a good word. It's one of those 4-letter words. So we're going to fix it. Listen to this. Charles trembled clear down to his toes. Limb-sized arms wrapped around his chest like constrictor snakes he had feared as a boy. He clawed the arm, but Charles's calloused fingers proved useless against the canvas shirt sleeve. Heartbeat thrashing in his ears, Charles knew he would die, if not right then, soon. Is that better? Yeah, do we feel something? Yeah, poor Charles. I don't know whatever happened to him. In my books, I write a lot of historical fiction. I do a lot of cowboy books, and that's where my heart is. I write cowboy stuff, and I love to write bar fights. I've witnessed a couple. I've never been in one, which back in my younger days, it was like, yeah, give me a good fight anytime. But the whole idea is you need to be able to feel what's going on. And so when I talk today, I'm going to be talking probably more in historical fiction cowboy terms, but certainly it applies to fantasy and science fiction and everything else. So when I slip back into the 1880s, you just kind of have to knock like my husband does and go, yeah, right. Okay, I saw this, let's start over. I am critiquing books, judging books for the New Mexico Press Women's Zia Awards, and this year it's memoir. And I'm just finishing up a book on burlesque dancing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to read. So anyway, at the back of this book, one of the endorsements, what they call blurbs, one of the endorsements I thought was really, really appropriate for us for telling a story. And what it did, this endorsement said, give the audience a good show, a good read. Whether it makes them laugh or cry, they are glad they took the journey. So that you as a writer That's your job, is to give the reader a terrific ride. And they want to go on this journey with you, and your job is to make it the best that you can. And what you do that way is through emotions. One of the ways to do it is through emotions. Okay. 95% of communicating is nonverbal. As writers, it's really hard for us sometimes to say, well, if my characters aren't talking, how can they communicate with each other? Oh. There's lots of ways to communicate. And I liked these pictures up here because they're definitely nonverbal communicating, but you can tell pretty much what they're feeling, what their emotions are. Right? Can everybody see that okay? Yes? No? Okay. And can everybody hear me okay? Okay, Dolly, thank you. So, writers like to think communication is mostly through dialogue, but what's not said is most important. Emotions lie at the core of every character's actions, choices, and words, all of which drive the story. Have you heard that before? I hope so, because I just said it. But what would a story be without emotions? And I do read I read a lot of books. I also write reviews for the Roundup magazine, which is part of Western Writers of America. I've got under my belt, I believe, 71 books that I've read. I also judge, as I told you, for the Zia Award. So I read a lot. And there are books I have read that have really no emotion. And it's tough. Those are hard to get through. So I'm going to talk about the various emotions. I'm going to highlight the physical sides, the internal sensations, the mental reactions, and how you can incorporate them into your writing. Okay, but first, bless you, bless you. Why is it important? Why should we write about emotions? Well, why? Because readers like to be touched, moved by a story. We like to imagine ourselves in worlds and situations which challenge us, that give us opportunity to do and be something other than what we do or are in our own reality. I bet you all have gotten lost in a book, or you've heard people say, oh, I got lost in the book, I couldn't put it down, I was so there. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to write. You want your readers to be in your story, and you want them to experience what your characters do. So what can writers do to make this experience authentic and to make it happen? Our job is to make the fictional world, whether it's fiction, poetry, memoir, nonfiction, it's all fictional because we're writing it. We're asking the readers to give up a few hours and to be part of our world. So what can we do? As I mentioned, this is for everybody. Memoir, nonfiction, poetry, which is the only thing I don't write, but I really appreciate good poetry. And those of you who write poetry, my hat is off to you. And obviously for fiction. You want readers to feel something, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to figure out how to do it. The writer and reader know the fictional events aren't real. I mean, we know that, right? And as writers, most of us know that. But the emotion has to be real. The emotion has to be real. Readers can feel fear and joy and be excited and know grief. They laugh, they cry, hopefully at your characters and not at your writing. They shiver and rage, all from reading the story. And the coolest part about all that is, in your fingers, your fingertips, you have the power. It's all in you. You have the power to make somebody else laugh, cry, to think. It's such a powerful feeling when you think about it. It's your words that create emotions in other people, not just in your own characters, but in other people, in your readers. It's kind of exciting. It's power, yeah. So emotion is vital to fiction. Without motion, our books can read like bad history books. And if any of you, you remember those days in school where you go through history and it's like, who cares? What? Who are these people? You know, so-and-so marched across this and such in the year of whatever, and they did this. So? Who cares? So you don't want a log of who did what, when, and where. You want it done right. You want the readers to feel the emotion. So there's a couple more examples, and these I did not write, so you can't blame me. He stabbed the man furiously. It's one of those LY words. How about he plunged the dagger into the man's chest again and again and again, screaming, "Die!" each time the blade stabbed into flesh. It's a little better than furiously. I love this one, and I would like to take credit for it, but I can't. I was happy. How many of us have read and written I was happy? How about my heart danced in the sun? Those of you who are poets, you can borrow that. Because I don't remember where I got it. So it's yours. Wow, my heart danced in the sun. Now let's look at some of the common problems of how to avoid writing them. We're going to, as Kurt mentioned earlier, telling versus showing. And as I put it here, yeah, I know. We all know to show, not tell. I mean, we've heard that from like day one. I think we were all in first grade when they said that, right? Yeah. And as Kurt mentioned earlier, okay, what do I do to fix that? I don't even know for sure that I'm telling, but if I am, how do I fix it? Well, here's a couple of ways to do it, besides taking his class. Here's some other ways to do it. Because readers are smart, they can figure things out. Years ago, when I first started writing, one of the guys in my critique group, and I brought in some god-awful piece of something I thought was incredibly brilliant, and he said, you have to trust your readers. So you trust your readers to be paying attention. You trust your readers to be smart. And once I figured that out, and got over, those of you who have been teachers, and I know a lot of us are former teachers, and a couple of us are current teachers, in teacher school they always said it takes 7 different ways to get a point across to students. Well, in my writing at the beginning, I would say the same thing 7 different ways. And I think that's why my friend said, just trust your readers. They're adults. They know what they're doing, and you don't have to do it 7 times. I've finally gotten out of that habit. But so if you're a recent teacher or a teacher right now, just check that out. All right, this is one of my favorite examples. Oh, one of the ways to figure out if you are telling is look at your verb. If it's one of those passive verbs, is, are, was, were, and, be, blah, 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 there's a good chance you're telling. So this one works, I think, really, really well. Here's the example of the bad writing. Mr. Paxton's eyes were sad as he gave her the news. I'm sorry, Joanne, but your position with the company is no longer necessary. Do we feel anything? No. No. Do we care? Not so much. Here's a way to fix it. One way to fix it. John rolled the pencil between his thumb and forefinger and sighed. Why had he been chosen to give her the news? Of the 3 vice presidents, why him? He chewed on his lower lip. She'd been his first hire in the upstart company. her liquid brown eyes, the way her skirt swished when she walked, the flirty lift of one side of her mouth when he had wanted her not only as a secretary, but for much, much more. And now he had to let her go. His trembling hand scrubbed his face. Oh, so sad. I feel so sorry for the guy. He had been the evil guy, and now he's like, oh, I have to fire her. So some of the words that were used in there were trembling, scrubbed. Notice there weren't any of those boring passive verbs. So you need to know your character's internal and external emotions and what they do. You've got to know it outright at the beginning to really do it well. Here's one more example from a gentleman I know. He lives here in town. It's called the book is called The Vendetta of Felipe Espinosa. His name's Adam Jones. So he wrote something beautiful, and I had to go back and try to make it boring, so I did. This is what I wrote. The answer shocked Felipe. Do we really know how Felipe felt at that time? Not really, other than shocked. Here's what Adam, who is really a good writer, wrote. The words invoked a bodily response akin to falling, for inside him his heart leapt and tingles of energy surged through his limbs as if in preparation of a hard impact on a rough surface. Yeah. It was, I saw that in a book that had been submitted for a contest, and while he did not win, I thought this was an excellent example of really strong writing. And he's a real nice guy. So if you ever get a chance to see Adam Jones, you can say, I heard something that you wrote. So are we feeling something now? Hopefully we are. You get the picture. It takes more words, but the message is conveyed so much better, and we relate to the character. And that's what I found as I've gone through, and because of several years ago talking to Kurt about filter words, that I realized that I just wasn't doing my job. And there's some kind of internal auditor in my writing brain that says, oh, no, you can only do one sentence. I was like, I have no word length. I can write as many as I want. Not for magazine writing, but for fiction and nonfiction, if you're writing books and things like that. There's no limit. You can write 30 words that say, I was happy. It's okay to do that. Another problem we've got are cliched emotions. And I have done this one, and I think in my last book, I think I've actually written this, and I rue the day that I found it because it's so embarrassing. The grin that stretches from ear to ear. Yeah, ouch. That's when I want to go back through all my books and black it out and go, oh, I can do this so much better now. Yeah. A single tear pooling in the eye before coursing down the cheek. Oh, give me a break. Quivering knees that knock together. Okay. And I am so part of this cliched writing, and I struggle with this every time I sit down at my computer because my hands automatically write out, her knees knocked together. No, they didn't. Delete, 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 delete. They're a sign of lazy writing. Or I can be a lazy writer sometimes. It's a result of settling on a phrase, easy phrase, because coming up with something new is hard. We're in a hurry, we've got something else we've got to be doing, and it's so much easier to say a grin that stretched from ear to ear than explaining why he was so happy and what it did to him physically. We fall back on cliches because you gotta face it, they work. They do. However, Cliches lack depth because they don't allow for a range of emotion. That single tear, how sad are we talking? Readers need to know the depth of emotion. So when you're writing, think about what your body and what happens to it when you're feeling that way. What does your body tell you? You got to tune into your body. That way, excitement is heart racing, pulse quickening, legs bouncing, speech becomes fast-paced, the voice is higher, louder. We've all been there. The easiest way to write emotions for your character is to think about you. How do you react? And then pay attention to it, and then write it. Or if you're uncomfortable writing about you, write about somebody you know, but don't tell them. So for any given emotion, there's literally dozens of internal and external changes that will show the reader what your character is feeling. Watch people at the mall. Do you ever sit at the mall and just watch people? Great character studies. Great character studies. And also, I hate to say this, but if you overhear a conversation that's intriguing, write it down. I did that in a restaurant one time. The guy was talking about caging up white pigeons to release later, and I thought, and the way he had mentioned it, it was almost like poetry. And I literally thought he was reciting poetry, but he was talking to this other guy. So, yeah. So I wrote it down on a napkin, and I lost the napkin. So note how people react and act when they're confused, overwhelmed, joyful, irritated. Now the face is the easiest to notice, but the rest of the body is just as telling. Don't overlook changes in the character's voice, speech, or overall bearing. Sometimes they will lean back. That's the, what is it, I'm trying to think of it. Sisters in Crime. They have done classes in the past on body language. Oh my goodness. That would be something very helpful here with Southwest writers, because body language is what we need to be writing. So when you're standing there, we're sitting there at the mall watching people, watch how people talk to each other, watch how they walk, but you can usually tell what's going on if somebody steps back, if they get in their face, and you can tell what part of the country they're from too. And I'm getting a little bit off topic, but generally speaking, the people from the East will stand closer when they're speaking than people here in the West. We're used to our spaces, we like space. We do that. A lot of times we don't shake hands because we want our space. And people who live out on the ranches, they usually holler at each other and give lots of extra room. I'm teasing. No, they stop their pickup trucks and talk to each other. But when you think about it and just start watching, you can almost tell what part of the country people are from the distance. And you need to relate that in your story with your characters. And if you don't know where your characters are from, you need to find out. And they'll tell you. They'll tell you. Keep in mind, each character is different. Just like people, not everyone reacts the same way. And it depends partly on their age. For example, an 80-year-old will not react the same way as a 30-year-old. But the emotions are the same. With happiness, for example, some people laugh, some grin, some cry. It just depends on the character, on that person. All right, we're going to talk about another thing to avoid is melodrama. You guys ever go to those old melodrama plays? If you get a chance, and I think it's still going out in Magic, they have a melodrama out there. At least they did a few years ago. So, okay, I'm going to give you an example of melodrama. Now, pretend this is a black mustache. It actually looks like a pen, but in my mind, it's a black mustache. This is melodrama, and this is not what you want to write. Pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. Pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. I'll pay the rent.
curses foiled again. My hero!
It's always nice coming from a drama background. It's one of my favorite things to do. I did that with my son-in-law one time, and he just started laughing, and then he rolled on the floor, and it was really pretty funny. But my point is, it's all in one emotion. They all are out there 100%. And your characters should not be out there 100%. Oh, and by the way, you're free to use my little scene there. I used to go to a melodrama down in El Paso as a kid, and the villain, turns out he was the weatherman on one of the TV stations, but he had this terrific cape that he would use, and I didn't bring a cape. So melodrama is of the average, the same intensity, and if you had emotions of the same intensity, they would be so easy to write, but they're not. And you don't want that. You want people with their ups and downs, even one character with ups and downs. The only time you would have, for a brief amount of time, the same kinds of emotions is if there's an argument, like a bar fight, or something like that, where a couple people get pretty heated and they're both angry and yelling at each other. Or maybe, on the other hand, one of those steamy, where's Sarah? One of those really steamy scenes where, they're getting together and clothing is coming off, and I just read this book on burlesque, so. Yeah. So you're going to have similar intensity on occasion, but you don't want to have it very long. If you've got two people in a bar fight, they're going to holler at each other. You can have a couple of lines back and forth, and then you need to change. Because what that does is, then you're going to have exclamation marks. And you've heard the story about exclamation marks. They're like coat hangers. You put two together in a closet and you open it up, and the next day you've got 30. Exclamation marks are the same way. You put an exclamation mark in a paragraph, and pretty soon you've got 50. So you don't want that. One exclamation mark per story. That's why you only put one clothes hanger in your closet. You do that, right? And think about the emotions. They vary in strength. For example, fear goes from uneasy to extreme paranoia to terror. So you need to figure that out. Joyful characters may express their glee by jumping up and down, by crying. You know people who get so excited they start crying? Yeah, we all know somebody like that. I'm not going to name names. Oh, did I say Pat out loud? Oh, I'm sorry. So to avoid melodrama, recognize that emotions run along a continuum from mild to extreme. For each situation, know where your character is along that line and choose appropriate descriptors. And I'm not saying for the entire novel. This is per scene, because if they're really excited here, then they should be very upset over here. And make sure that your character follows a smooth emotional arc. For example, you don't want Dana telling Mac that they've broken up. She doesn't want to go out with him anymore. Generally speaking, Mac is not going to go commit suicide because they broke up. He may even be relieved. He's going to typically would be sad, and then maybe be angry, and then maybe try to win her back, and then eventually go, well, I'm better off without her. Most people are not going to jump in the lake just because somebody broke up with them. There are cases, but generally not. If you've written your character like that, an over-the-edge kind of character that anything can happen and you never know what they're going to do, then yeah, maybe possibly that would work. But you have to have presented that along the way. So don't just surprise the reader with, you have this mild-mannered guy and all of a sudden he's killing himself. You really need to work up to that. So a fourth common problem is Over-reliance on dialogue or thought. Now, I've just stood here and told you that dialogue is so important because readers connect. They want to connect with the characters, and you do that through dialogue. And now I'm telling you, one of the problems is over-reliance on dialogue, and it is. Dialogue is great, and you need to have dialogue, but you also need some internal dialogue. You need emotional, physical responses. And because this emotional writing is a little more tricky to do, sometimes we fall back on writing dialogue or narrative. And yeah, sometimes it works, but usually you can make it better. And your job is to make it better. Better, better, better. So here's an example of a character feeling, but an over-reliance on leads to problems. I'm so sad that Jerry's leaving, exclamation mark. Maria said sadly, L-Y. Don't cry like that, Maria, Juanita said, trying to console her. Your tears are staining your new blouse that I bought for you, and it's silk. Exclamation mark. Yeah. Oh, I did not write that, by the way. Not So one of the problems in using too much dialogue or thought is the overuse of exclamation marks. Telling the reader what's being felt. I'm so happy. I'm so sad. And if you don't have enough dialogue, the readers are not going to relate to your characters. So you've got to have that happy balance. And how many of you write screenplays or have written a screenplay? 2? Oh, come on. It's really interesting because it's all dialogue, mostly. It's a real challenge. Okay, so fixing it can be fun. I really enjoy rewriting, and I know some of you have said, I hate to rewrite, so it's just going to be the first thing that comes to mind, and it's going to be perfect. Yeah, but rewriting is like do-overs. You didn't get it right the first time, you can do it again, and again, and again. Somebody told me back in the old days when I had written my first short story, and it was absolutely perfect the way it was, it said, and I believe it was from SouthWest Writers, they said, the average rewrite is 7 times. And I kind of put my shoulders back and went, not mine, mine's pretty perfect the way it is. Yeah, 7 times or more. So if you're one of these who don't believe in rewrite, please believe in rewrite. It's fun. Because if anything, you can go back and put in better words, better verbs. Make yourself known. Look for your boring verbs and fix those. So fixing is fun. You get inside your character and you roll around in there and see what comes out. See what makes them tick. It's fun to do, and I never really embraced this when I wrote my first book. I'm going, now these guys are crazy, because I had heard this before. Talk to your characters and see what makes them tick, and your characters will reveal themselves to you, and you'll just be this tremendous writer. And I'm going, yeah, right. I want to write. I don't want to spend my time talking to my characters. How dumb is that? Well, again, there's a lot of to be said about that. I do. I talk to my characters, and they talk to me all the time, to where sometimes I tell them to shut up. You guys, you're all nodding, going, yeah, mine too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Find out what makes them tick. What do they like to do? What scares them? And that's one of my favorite things to find out about my characters, is what scares them. Because you can use that. It's not very nice, but you can use it. It's like your little brother who's afraid of spiders. Go get a lot of spiders, yeah. That's kind of the idea. You make your characters so three-dimensional that when somebody does something to them that they're afraid of, because you already know that they're afraid of spiders. It just makes it so much better. It ramps everything up. Maybe you have a bad guy who brings in a pet tarantula. Oh, that would be mean, but so cool. So your writing and your emotion is much more effectively conveyed through a mixture of dialogue, thoughts, and body language. Dialogue, thoughts, and body language. And while I'm stopping here, I'd like to thank Kim for being awesome up here. She's wonderful with my PowerPoint presentations.
All set. Yeah.
So what you do to fix this, the first thing you're going to do is identify the root emotion. Now, as you're sitting out there, you probably have a couple emotions. One of them I may not want to know about. But you could be bored, you could be excited, you could be happy, you could be confused. You could be all sorts of things. So you've got probably more than one emotion, right? But when you're writing, your character should have a couple emotions, but you're going to figure out the root emotion. What's the dominant emotion? And play off of that. Because if I were to write about, I'm going to pick on Pat again because she's sitting up front. If I'm going to write a scene and Pat's bored and she's confused and excited and hungry all at the same time, then the reader's going to get confused. And they're going to say, what? And they're going to close the book. You don't ever want to give the reader an opportunity or a reason to close your book, ever. So, you know. So you figure out the root emotion, maybe it's boredom, and then write about that, and at some point you can bring in maybe confusion. Thank you, Pat, for being such a good model. I appreciate it. You utilize the setting to something else you do. The characters interact with the world around them. So you have a character in the kitchen who's angry. It's the same woman who John just let her go, even though the secretary, even though she'd been having an affair with this guy. At work, what is she going to do? Possibly. Well, she's probably not going to pick up her computer and throw it against the floor and stomp around. She might have a little tiny tear, and she's going to do some other things. When she goes home, after she drinks a couple glasses of wine, she may just slap the glass off of the table. So it's the same kind of emotions, but you have to do it differently depending on the setting.
How about making it more interesting? Slap him with sexual harassment.
Oh, that's a different kind of story then. Boy, nowadays, yeah. So less is more. Using too many cues can slow the pace and dilute the reader's emotional experience. Strong imagery will paint an immediate picture, so always strive to create concrete body language for the reader to interpret. Always think like a reader. And then the last one is to twist the cliche. Instead of shivers running up and down the spine, which my characters used to do that a lot, why don't you try a phrase like shivers swarming over the back of the legs? How about a shiver likened to leafcutter ants marching along a vine? Oh. And don't call it a shiver. Describe the sensations of tightening skin. Don't be afraid to experiment. Nobody's going to be judging you except the reader and your publisher. And your mom. No. Okay, here's some examples of things you can do. I'm going to use the emotion of anticipation. Physical signs: sweaty palms, trembling hands, crossing and uncrossing the legs, list making. There's a lot more than that. How about internal? So that the physical signs is something that you can see. The internal has to be from the point of view, obviously, of the character. The fluttery feeling in the stomach, anticipation. Breathlessness, pounding heart, tingling all over, probably resulting from the breathlessness. Some mental signs: daydreaming, imagining what will happen, overthinking. And there's also acute or long term. There's a sleep loss, frustration and impatience, and the list can go on and on and on. Let's go to the next slide. We'll look at confusion. Some of the physical signs: fumbling, excessive swallowing, stuttering, staring down at the ground. Internal signs: rising body heat, fluttering in the stomach. Now notice anticipation and confusion both have fluttering in the stomach. If you've written it right, it's really obvious that they're feeling confused instead of anticipating. Sweating, tightening chest, mental signs: mind racing, hoping for interruption to delay answering. I thought that was a really good point. Thoughts that freeze. Long-term signs are loss of self-esteem, failing grades, flight response. You can use all of this. I'm going to skip the next 2 pages. I told Kim that if we got short on time, I was going to skip a couple of pages, and I'm skipping. I figured I would. I have recommended reading, and as a matter of fact, I brought the book. It looks like this. It's called The Emotion Thesaurus, and it's self-published. I'm assuming you can get it online. I haven't looked because I have one. I don't know where I got it. Amazon? Okay. Yeah.
Public library has that.
Perfect. Public library. Why pay for it when you can get it for free? But then the thing is, I refer back to this fairly often, especially when I'm not sure that this would be a physical sign for this kind of emotion, even though maybe I did that. I thought I would give you a couple of tips before we have to leave, and then I'll be happy to answer questions, and I can stick around for a while. Okay, some writing possibilities and emotional writing. A ticking clock. We all have seen shows like this, especially in science fiction. Well, as you've got 1 minute to disarm the nuclear reactor, we all blow up. 30, 25, it's like, oh! And what's happening to you inside? You're going, oh my God, I hope we get it done in time. Well, you know it is, but still it's that journey that they're taking us on. And that's what we want to do. As the scene hurries to complete the task or meet the need, mistakes can be caused by the characters rushing through the door. And it gives us more of a roller coaster ride. The ticking clocks are wonderful, wonderful ways to do this. And it doesn't have to be by the minute. It could be, I think I used it in one of my books. Well, we only have until July 1st to get to this place. Oh, and there's all sorts of things that happen along the way. Well, tick tock, July 1st is coming up. So and it works really well, because one of the things that I found anyway with my writing is it keeps me on track. It's like, okay, oh, I only have 4 more days to get them here. I really need to write better. And then I find myself writing faster. It's like, oh, I only got 3 days. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, it's just the other world. For each scene, identify the emotion you need to show and think in terms of 3. What 3 ways have you reinforced the character's feeling through verbal and nonverbal communication? What 3 ways? And I talked about this earlier, but I'm going to talk about it briefly again. Men and women experience and express emotion differently. Again, I'm speaking in generalities, because we all probably have met guys who will cry a little more quickly than others. And I've known women who wouldn't cry no matter what. So, but in general, men and women experience and express emotion differently. So when writing a character of the opposite sex, get a second opinion. Just to ensure your character's reaction, thoughts, and feelings, make sure they're authentic. Another one is smell. Smell triggers memory. Take advantage of this sense and build olfactory, ooh, you like that word, olfactory? Yeah. Descriptions into the scene. This will draw readers in and make them feel part of the action. And sometimes it elicits memories from them, and that's like a plus. If they can really react to your character who walks into the house and smells bizcochitos, baking, not burning like in my house, but baking. Hopefully your reader will think, oh, I remember my mom making cinnamon cookies. Oh, yeah, that was so good. That's what you want. Yeah. This is hard because it tells you that you're not doing things quite right. Make a list of your body language crutches. Do your characters frown? Mine smile a lot. And I'm trying to break that habit. I really am. Most of my critique group is sitting right here, and I have to tell you, I really am trying. Shrugging. Please don't say shrug the shoulders, because what else are you going to shrug? Again, you got to take Kurt's class, he's going to tell you that. Head shaking. Things like that. Use your word processor's search and replace feature to highlight these so you can go back and look at it. Okay, emotion should always lead to decision making, either good or bad, that will propel the story forward. Because if your stories don't go forward, then it's just like those history textbooks. Don't forget the power of texture. Oh my goodness. The way an object feels against the skin can create a powerful reaction and add to the reader's experience. Again, maybe they've had the same experience. Sleep in satin sheets and slide right out. Make a list of body parts you incorporate when expressing emotion. Are there ones you don't use at all? Do you always use the face and never the hands or the feet, the legs? I mean, there's all sorts of parts to a body, and use all of those. Challenge yourself to come up with a unique way of using the missing parts. I tend to write from about the shoulders up, and I know I'm really trying hard, critique group, to get the rest of the body involved. Yeah, I had one of my characters cross their legs at their ankles, this guy, and they're going, no, it's a little too feminine. I'm like, well, I don't know how to write the other way, so they helped me. That's what critique groups are really good at. Make a character list. They're also called character Bibles or lists, so you can keep track of the hair color and the hair length. Is it short, long, medium? The eyes and the clothing choices for each character, because I can't tell you how many times I've written somebody in the first few chapters that have green eyes, and by chapter 11 they've got brown eyes. So I have a list of character traits that I go back through all the time because I can't remember. Force your characters to make choices between bad and worse. And I'm not talking donuts or sweet rolls. And whoever brought donuts, thank you. I wish I had one. Everything a character. I lost my place. Okay. Bad and worse. We've all had bad and worse. You're gonna get your taxes audited or that root canal. Yeah. I'd probably go for, I don't know. I'd probably go to the Bahamas or something. All right, the last slide. Body movements should never be random. Don't have your character sitting there rocking back and forth unless they're crazy or very, very nervous. It shouldn't be random. There should be a reason they're doing what they're doing. And at the end, you want them to achieve an end, reveal emotion, or characterize. Now, when introducing and describing characters, parcel out personal details in small bits. Don't give us an information dump right at the beginning and tell us all about them and then forget the rest of the book. Little tiny bits along the way, because while you have to trust your readers and they're smart, they're not that smart. If you tell them in chapter 1 that the woman has short hair, and that's all you tell them, and then they're going to forget. But if you tell them everything at once, they're really going to forget. So, yeah, a little bit at a time. And if it's not pivotal to the plot or the characterization, don't put it in. Just take it out. It could be like your little secret. You know these things. Okay. So, that's kind of a wrap up there. By taking time and thought, you'll get rid of all those pesky LYs, and you don't even have to use a tissue box. And your readers will thank you. Thank you.